Hey everyone, I hope you are well. Today I have an awesome guest. They're always awesome. I know, I love them all, but today is one that I have been stalking for over 2 years almost, which she doesn't know about. I've probably just told her I've started stalking her. But today I have Cara Gilligan, and the reason I've been stalking Cara is because of the great work that she does around Tantra and around ancient wisdoms, especially working with the feminine. There's some really good subjects, but today is going to be focused around 5 core wounds that we kind of get locked up in through our process and our journey. And I thought they were fascinating when I did one of the teachings with Cara recently. And I thought, oh my God, I could do a whole show just on this. So this is what this is. This is an introduction to Cara and the work that she does. And then obviously the wounds that we're going to talk about. But Cara, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Nat. I'm so happy to be here and really excited to dive into this piece of the sacred wealth mysteries and helping everybody kind of unhook themselves from the pain bodies that really keep us stuck when it comes to wealth and leadership and personal empowerment. So I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, it's all about that at the moment: personal empowerment, sovereignty, standing up for yourself. What is important to you? How can you build your life in the way that you want? We're all now being challenged, and I think my audience knows this as well. Anybody that's new to this channel, we're talking about radical personal responsibility and whatever you need to do in order to get there. So this is telling the truth, dealing with your emotional wounds, looking at your level of authority in your life, looking at your boundaries, looking what you spend your money on. Do your words match up to your actions? It's all about integrity. And a lot of the work that you do, Cara, and I love it, it is about going into the shadow, sitting in the shadow, staying in the shadow, rooting through the shadow, seeing what's down there, emptying the box, trying stuff on, and then literally bringing it back into the light. There's no kind of like easy path. You cover so many different things. You like 3 of the things that I think are awesome, which I think a lot of people will resonate with. One is the Magdalene wounds, which many of you people watching might know about. The other one is sacred wealth, which we're talking a little bit about today. And the reason I found you, and I haven't ever admitted this online, but I did say to you beforehand, I actually found you because I was reading a fascinating book around kind of the Jungian mindsets, or the archetypes, and it was all around the sacred prostitute. And I was fascinated to understand that the original journey of a prostitute was not actually the way that we understand prostitutes today, and that we see sex workers today. There was a far more sacred approach to it. And it was blowing my mind. And I was secretly reading this book, not telling anyone at the time. And then I went onto YouTube, and YouTube showed me your channel, and I watched you, and I said to you, I've literally, for 2 days, I fell down a Cara Gilligan hole and just watched your stuff and writing notes. And I was like, oh my God, it's like this woman is in my room. Like, you just knew. And the way that you were articulating the journey of the sacred prostitute, it took a lot of the shame, not that there's much there for me, but in the sense of, for a lot of women, I could feel a lot of shame being lifted and a lot of understanding around how we get mixed up between money and men and sex and our worth and all of that stuff. So I wanted to really dive in with you today in that area, mainly around the sacred wealth.
Yeah. And well, let me just say, I mean, I think one of the reasons why that archetype was so powerful for me, and I would say in a way, it almost overlights everything that I do, from the Magdalene Mysteries work to sacred wealth and kind of bringing feminine energy back into the money power economic system, and also into, kind of understanding the priestess path, is that, all of these areas, sexuality, especially like sex and money, these are areas that I think all of us do carry a lot of shame in, like whether we admit it or not, or, these like sex and money are like the 2 things that are like kind of a little bit more taboo to talk about, like to really, really get in deep with those types of things. And I found like that archetype, the archetype of the sacred prostitute, she deals very, direct sexuality and money sort of in service to the sacred. So I found it's just a fascinating area for it's a fascinating archetype for doing exactly what you just said that I do, going in, digging out what is creating the obstacle and bringing it back into alignment with, whatever your sacred or your true self wants.
Mm-hmm.
Called
Some of the
being it.
things, some of the things that you discussed on the latest course that I took part in, which I found really refreshing. I'm into business. I'm into a lot of different things. I'm quite business focused, but I'm also very feminine at the same time.
Mhm.
And it's about fairness and about building a team and a culture in my business. And the way that I've built it is that everybody's transparent and everybody kind of knows what's on the cards and where we're at with the money and where we're at with the project. And the transparency comes from me wanting it to be accepted and wanting it to be totally open, so I don't have any hooks where somebody can trip me up. It was that kind of feminine approach. I want it to be all out there. I want to be seen in an attention way as well. It's like I've got nothing to hide. But you talked about conscious economics, and you mentioned about a kind of a different approach. And something that really struck with me is, and I see it a lot. I see a lot with my work with clients and a few other people as well when I've been discussing it with people, is that I'm still going to say we, because I'm not speaking for everyone, but we tend to have this in the spiritual community. We tend to have this approach that money is a bad thing and money is not good, and look what's happening in the world because of money. And one of the spins I've always thought is what you do with money that is the problem. It's not the money in itself. And within your teachings, you really clearly described something. You said, look at all the people that are up at the moment running the world as such, the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos and doing all of these different things. Looking at their positions, there is no opposition. There is no feminine opposition for those people in the world. There's nobody standing up and saying, hey, I can have just as much wealth, but do good with it. And I'd love it if you could go in a little bit on that, on kind of your view on why that's important for us to be able to, come from the feminine approach, not around being a feminist, but just a more softer approach. And then obviously why it's important to challenge those positions as opposed to hate on them.
Right. Great. I mean, well, I worked for Jeff Bezos. I worked for Amazon early on in my life. And I remember having a lot of judgment towards some of the practices, particularly some of the environmental practices that I saw going on in the company from working behind the scenes. And it's just, I mean, the business model itself, get anybody anything they want in 2 days or less, individual packaging and shipping items, just there's a large environmental footprint with that. And obviously we're all a part of it. But while I was at Amazon, I kind of had this like haughty little attitude. I don't, I don't want to work for a company that's like eating up the Amazon rainforest. I felt like I was working for a tree cemetery. That was my immediate thought, because there was no recycling. So I had this judgmental approach towards, attitude towards that business. And then when I left, I was thrown into the driver's seat of what it's actually like to start a business and what it's like to actually run a business, and the stress of when you have employees or when you have a team, and getting everybody, what they need, and all of the weight of that responsibility falling on the head, right? The leader of the business. And I think what happened for me is, it's kind of like, what's that saying? Be the change you want to see in the world. I really realized that it's easy to kind of sit back and judge and say, oh, this should be more like this, or this should be more like that. But what we actually really need, and what I learned from my own direct personal experience was like, hey, if you really feel that way, go out and do it. Go out and show it. Go out and demonstrate it. It's time for us to not so much carry these beliefs and these ideas and at some times these judgments towards our society and how we want it to be. This is really the time for us to live our truths, and that will breed, I think, anybody that starts walking the actual experiential path rather than the mental projection, dream or judgment path, who start to, once you're on the tantric, that to me is what tantra is. Once you're on the lived embodied experience path, you get more humility, you get more wisdom, you start to see what the actual pressures are, what the actual problems are, what the actual tendencies, whether those are in your own subconscious as like a human being, and your own fight or flight mechanism coming up when you have to deal with paying the bills at the end of the month, or whether you are a consumer and your own unconsciousness, your own addiction, your own willingness to sort of adhere to external programming, whatever it is. We all have a role, and we all have a responsibility in what the consciousness that is creating our economic system as a whole. And that's really where the kind of the vision and some of the teachings for the Sacred Wealth Academy came in, because it was, it's not just about how to make money. It's also about how to spend money, how to invest money, and how to really work with money and within the context of power systems, world power systems, in a way that is bringing consciousness, and in a way that is whatever your values are, allowing you to live in alignment. It's kind of like a yoga.
Yeah, no, totally it is. Yeah. The way you explained it was on the course. I mean, just again as well, it's a very beautiful way of looking at it, and it's that radical ownership of stepping up and being your best self. And there's a really great book. I love one of the authors, Gay Hendricks. He's got a book called The Big Leap, and I read it years and years ago. And he talks about this zone of excellence. Like we're living in life, we strive for this zone of excellence, and we get to this level of where we are accomplished. We have the car, we have the house, we have the niceties that we want in our lives. But he said it's a whole different ball game going to the level of genius. Like to live in your genius requires a different set of skills. It requires you to let go of the things that are comfortable, to let go of the things that in order to challenge yourself even further, and to go on to the path that really your soul is calling for. And that path is never easy. It comes in the darkest and the lightest ways. The highs and the lows are magnificent journeys, but they're challenging, and a lot of people can't quite get there. And I thought it was really nice when you explained around the reason that there isn't, and it really made me see there isn't enough, and I want to say women, but not because I'm a feminist and I'm really going to go off on the women vibe, but there's not enough female embodiment and conscious female
energy
businesses at that level, and it's you can see that, and I know a lot of people think that you can dip into the world of conspiracies, which I do often, and I love going down a rabbit hole, I'm not going to lie, but I don't need to live there. I need to understand the nature of the different environments. But you can get lost in the world that if you make it to a certain point, you have to get bought out, otherwise you can't go any further. Now, that is a mystery. It's a rumor. Is it true? I don't personally know. But for me, striving for what I want to do with my business, I don't see a limit. I don't see that if I get to a certain amount, I'm going to have to start paying off the mafia just to be able to make it. I feel that if I put the right intention in the beginning, I'm creating a force field within the business that grows itself, that is divinely protected for the purpose of what it wants to do. And something like that could challenge these status quo businesses, these large businesses. I'm not saying I need to build an empire, but if you have the right intentions everywhere, which is what you're very clear about, if you're doing it for the good of the people, you can create a different energy. And I know that your teachings are very centered around coming into alignment with what's true for you. And only then, I think, can you really build a business, once you've done your own work, because then you can really replicate what you've done on yourself on a large scale, which is, the tantric path, which you lovingly teach very well.
Can I speak to what you just brought up? Because I think it's the piece around, oh, well, is there this level that you're going to reach where you have to sell your soul, or where you have to pay off the mafia, where you have to somehow integrate with this like kind of nefarious evil force, so to speak, in order to get success? Because I think when it comes to especially the more spiritually oriented community and wealth and money and leadership and empowerment, that is a really, really, really big obstacle for most people. And a lot of us believe that. And we believe that because we feel that there is an energy that has that quality, and we're all in touch with it. We can feel that it's everywhere, and it's running at that level of the world. But I really, really want to bring something home to the audience here, which is that you may get to a level of the game, so to speak, where it seems like you have to do that, where a lot of the pressure, whether that be externally or whether that be internally, from the programming, from how other people are operating, is pushing you in that direction. But none of us, all of us have the sovereign free choice to, none of us are going to get forced into compromising ourselves or compromising our values. I think that's like the first thing to realize. And a lot of people don't understand that, the opportunity of somebody actually stepping into a crucible or an energy field like that and choosing consciousness, or choosing to do things differently, or choosing to do things consciously, is basically the nature of God awakening, like in and through you, and not just for you, but for potentially millions or billions of other human lives that you might touch. And we need to start thinking about, when we see distortion, or when we see what is typically called evil, we need to stop thinking, instead of like, who is the enemy that is responsible for that, we need to start thinking about, like, how can I be responsible in that area? Because what evil or what darkness actually is unconsciousness. It means nobody here at this particular point in time is able or making a choice to do it differently. And the reality is that we all have that ability. We all have that choice. Every single human being alive has that opportunity to do the things that other beings like Jesus, or, Gandhi, or there's always been human beings that step into levels of the system and choose to do things differently and open up like totally different realities and totally different worlds. And so that's always available to any of us. And so there really is nothing to fear, except, I guess you could say, except your own self and your own choices and your own character. picture. And, you
which
know,
is what everyone's
really
hearing anyway on a daily basis.
yeah. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
with that in mind, I think like a lot of the work that we're going to talk about today with like the money wounds and the kind of some of the work I've done in like templating like the collective unconscious on how it drives us in relationship to these choices that we all have to make is like an aid and an assistance, because once you can kind of see how a thought form or how a fear matrix might drive you to believe that you have to hurt somebody else in order to make a buck, or might drive you to believe X, Y, or Z, then you can say, oh, okay, like that's an outdated reality. I don't need to give my energy or give my life force. We got the roosters.
I love the chickens. We've always all the time. Whenever you're doing a recording, they come in the background. I love it.
I know, and there's one like, and sometimes they're not this close to the house, but then sometimes they just get right up at the window and they're like, ah! They want to be heard. So
yeah, they want to be on the show. Well, I love what you're saying, and it really resonates so much with many of the things I've been trying, like, you know, consciously making decisions within myself to align with what I want for the future. And, you know, even just this weekend, I had an awful, it was technically one of the worst days of my life on Saturday. And that's a big statement because I've had some really shitty days in the past. But Saturday was a complete fabrication of my own mind going in on a spiral that was almost to the point of, like, you know, when they say dark night of the soul, this was the dark day of the soul. And I was in this anxiety for the entire day. And I was going through a situation that I'd created, and I made one of those decisions that didn't serve who I wanted to be in the future. And man, did it hurt. It was just like, oh, and I was so embarrassed. I was shy. I felt vulnerable. And at some point, some past life stuff came in as well. I really felt like I was going to get kidnapped, and I was in like this terror. And I sat there and I was thinking, all because I made a decision that doesn't serve me today. Just one. And it happened a few months ago, and it literally got me to feeling that low and that bad. And I thought, if I was in charge of people or had responsibility over a project that was for the good of the people, and I had to go through a day like I went through on Saturday with that responsibility, like at the minute I'm only responsible for myself and a very, very small team. But, you know, if that was an Amazon business and I was having a Saturday like that, you know, you can understand why some people make these decisions that don't serve the greater self, because they're under so much pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think compassion, not only having compassion for not only yourself, but also for them, for all of us, and understanding that, you know, we're not like, nobody's gonna do this perfectly, and that we're in a learning and growth process. And I mean, certainly, like you mentioned, like the transparency that you have when you relate with your team, and letting them know like where the financials are at, or whatever you need to let them know. And like, that's a really big thing, is we put so much pressure on our leaders to be these like perfect mommy and daddies. We like idolize them. We like raise them up, and they're like, they've got all the answers, and they're like you know, and then if they don't do something, it's like crash and burn. We want to tear them down, American Revolution vibe going on. And I think that it's like, it's important to, like, there needs to be a new paradigm of leadership where leaders are able to be vulnerable, and where leaders are able to admit, I don't know. Or leaders are able to say, like, in this instance, you know, there's a challenge and I need help. You know, I need the input of the collective, or, you know, whatever it is. But I can tell you right now, from everything I saw, you know, as a young woman in an Ivy League school, everything that I know from, you know, my friends that, you know, have been in the military, and the way that, we train leaders right now, which is almost exclusively training them only in masculine energy. And this idea that to be a man or to be a leader, you can't show any emotion, any touch with your feminine energy or with empathy or with, that's part of the problem too. And it's not just about a lack of embodied female businesses. It's also about how men are being programmed and that they feel like they can't have like vulnerability when they're in a position of leadership, or we feel like no leaders can be. And that's also a problem. And so there has to be a whole new paradigm. A lot of my work is about actually just balancing and bringing feminine energy back into how you do leadership, like how you do money, because right now it's kind of been, these are the Magdalene wounds, it's kind of been shamed, demonized, and cast out. And like that's part of the problem, is there's a tantric imbalance. There's too much of one polarity and not enough of the other. And so a lot of my work is about bringing that feminine polarity back in. And I think that having compassion for yourself and knowing that, yeah, sometimes you do make mistakes. Sometimes you do make a choice that's out of fear or out of self-interest or not in alignment with your highest destiny for whatever reason. And we have to have the ability to, accept that about ourselves and find a way to also be in communication with one another in the context of business and in the context of economics and in the context of relationship at the infrastructural level, so that we're able to evolve and we're not just always learning through that kind of like illusionary like perfection, then it's like, and then like total destruction and total devaluation of the self, or the ups and downs of like spiking the market and then crashing it out type of deal. Yeah.
It's even with the money wounds, this week alone I'm raising investment for one of my companies, and it's not a huge amount, but I know that I want to get the right kind of investors on. So I could make a decision to get the wrong kind of investors on, or get a loan for the business to cover all the staff wages and everything, or I could hold out and wait for the right one, energetically wait for the right one. So I said to the staff, and I hate calling them staff, I don't like doing that, but I said to the team, and I said individually, this is where I'm at right now. I am either going to worry about not being able to pay the bills and try and manifest the right investment from that space, or I can be totally honest with you and say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I'm trying to create. Is there any leniency on me being able to pay you at the end of the month, or me being able to wait a little bit so I can actually go and get what I need? What are your financials like? Can you hold out for this money? And, can I put other things off? And is that okay for me to do that? I don't want to take something away from you that you definitely need. So, and two of them were like, no, it's fine. One can wait an extra week. The other one can wait an extra month. But it gave me extra energy, extra time, extra understanding for me to go, right, well, now I'm not under pressure, which is I can put myself under and feel like I'm not good enough. I haven't got enough. I'm never going to do this. I'm crap. What's going to happen? Now I've taken myself out of that mind loop, and I've put myself in a position where I'm stronger because my team's behind me. They know what I'm trying to do, and I don't have this, you need to pay me now. It's more like, oh, I understand. I'm on this journey with you. Go and get the right investor because we know it'll help the business. And that was raw and vulnerable for me to have those conversations, because nobody wants to say that. And this is why entrepreneurs, put their head in the sand. But I was like, I have to do this differently. I have to change the game and show up differently, because it is difficult and I haven't got everything I need, and I'm not abundant at the moment in the ways that I've always dreamed that it's going to be easy to build a team. But I'm learning from this process. And it was so easy for me to have those conversations in the end, and it turned out perfectly. But there would be a year ago or 2 years ago where I would have never wanted to say that to someone that I'm working with, through fear of feeling less than or judged, or, you know, like, oh my God, you're trying to build a business, but you've got no money. It's like, technically, yes, everyone's trying to build a business with no money, but you know what? You don't want to admit it. You're like, oh my God. But it helps because it's just, now it's been radically honest. And I feel like I've got a better relationship with them because they're on this journey with me. Yeah, so it's a deep process. But I wanted to also, so the main reason I wanted to speak to you today, Akara, was because of the money wounds. So let's use that as a segue into the money wounds. So I'm conscious of your time as well. We don't want to go over an hour. I love kind of keeping it short and concise. We've been live now for 30, we're not actually live, but we've been pre-recording for 30 minutes. So we have another half an hour to tap into these. And there is some pretty interesting stuff that Kara is going to be talking about now, which blew my mind. There's 5, as far as we're aware, there's 5 what's known as money wounds, and these are, we're going to go into each individual one just so you can explain a little bit about each one. I personally massively identified with the slave wound. It was like a bang on my head when you said it, and I'm like, oh God, I needed a pen and a paper just to write everything down, and I had to stop the video. And I'm like, I need to process this, because there's certain things that I can see in my life that have definitely come from having that wound within myself. So I'll allow you to actually explain what the wounds are, and then we'll jump in. First one, we'll go into the slave wound, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So I just want to give people a little bit of an overview for how to relate to these 5 wounds that I'm going to introduce. So this is really looking at the money system almost from a zoomed out level, and recognizing like the macroeconomic system has 5 really core wounds, and these are ways in which the more of the divine feminine, which is an energetic principle, was basically cut out of our mindset, of our collective sort of agreement structure for how we work with money and how we work with power on this planet. And that has resulted in the economic system operating more as like a force of destruction on the planet, like the planetary ecosystem. And so what I saw is there's these 5 core wounds, and I also base this a lot because I follow like the Venus path, and so Venus herself makes like sort of 5 dips into the underworld. And so Venus is a planet that rules money, and it rules a lot of other things. It rules sexuality, it rules love, it rules money. And so if we can think of those sort of 5 shadows as those 5 underworld journeys that Venus, the planet, makes in her astrological journey through in relation to the Earth in our night sky, these are kind of the 5 archetypical wounds in the collective consciousness. And I just want to say and be really mindful that there's a difference between relating to it on the collective level versus like somebody, like a group of people that were actually enslaved or recovering from like the ancestral oppression of their ancestors. So we have to be sensitive on that level. You know, the relationship between the collective field and the personal and the individual experiences, and honoring on that level. But for me to introduce these 5 wounds, they are the slave wound, as you said, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that. But that wound specifically relates to dynamics of power, and each of the wounds has sort of like, okay, here's one of the greatest abuses that has ever existed in our money power system. Obviously, slavery is going to be the root of that. And so we look at the shadow, and then we look at, you know, here is the healing principle that addresses that particular shadow. So I want to say that each of the wounds has a healing principle or healing power that brings that into balance. So you have the slave wound, You have the indigenous wound, what has happened to indigenous people as a result of colonization, as a result of basically groups of people wanting that land or wanting those resources, and kicking people off. Some cases, jides and things like that happen. You have the witch wound, which is the obviously we think about the burning of the witches in Europe and in America, but it's also a wound that really relates to that that fear of being different from the mainstream or the collective consciousness, and the persecution of difference or of uniqueness that is being expressed in terms of human consciousness, but then also there's a whole economic level of it, as far as like the uniqueness, like having very homogenized systems of manufacturing and production, and are kind of, you know, like big chain stores coming in and casting out small mom and pop businesses, and how that's affecting economic structures. Then you have the
you got the fallen warrior ones.
Okay, the fallen warrior wound. So this relates more to specifically masculine energy, and it relates to the I guess you could say the anthropological consciousness of men protecting women and children, and protecting land, and protecting cities, and what happens when there is a conquest by a neighboring kingdom or another group of people, and you lose that ground, and the warriors they don't succeed, they fail. So the kind of that relates to the masculine pain body. And of course, some of what we were just talking about, you know, feeling like you can't keep the ship going, and if you don't do it, like the whole, you know, all these people under you are not going to get paid, and who's going to feed their family structures. So that very masculine pressure that's a lot of times on us when we're in business and when we're in leadership, and the fear of that failure, and then possibly even the experience of it. And then the final one is the religious.
I got them all written down. Don't you worry.
The religious money wound, which is how basically collectively we separated sacred spiritual consciousness from material consciousness. And this, of course, was done very deeply in Judeo-Christianity, and it's even written into the laws of our Constitution in, you know, the United States, the separation of church and state. Ironically, however, when you go back far enough in time, and we start to look at, you know, other epics of other cultures and ancient civilizations on this planet, where there was, I guess you could say, a harmony between, I guess you could say, a more effective civilization. In many cases, these were civilizations where sacred principles were integrated into leadership, were integrated into trade, were integrated in, you know, these were where spirituality was completely integrated into sciences, into every aspect of how the culture was running itself. And really and truly, I think that while we might not have organized religions operating within the context of our you know, legal system, or within the context of our money system, we most certainly do need spiritual consciousness and sacred laws integrated. So the whole, if you're dealing with a religious money wound, you might have internalized the belief of separation between spirit and matter, and that is actually the right or the holy way to be. And And so it's working through those programs and working through those beliefs. But I know we're going to focus today on the slave wound because we won't have time to do all of that.
No, we won't. But what do you know what we could, I was just thinking what we could do is if we because I know I want to have you back. I know I want to go deeper down the rabbit hole with all these different things, but I'm just thinking for the sake of ease today, and obviously to help you with kind of putting this out to your crowd as well. And I find what you discuss in your courses and stuff, which all the information will be left below of kind of what they are and what we can do moving forward with Kara. But I think if we could say what, in short, what the slave wound is, and then the opposite of it very quickly, and then we'll do each one like what it is, a short version of what it is, and the opposite, because I know with the slave wound you mentioned the opposite of being a slave was being in absolute power, and that's frightening at the same time, but it's understanding that. So I'd love it if you can just kind of, if we can try and do it, I mean we don't have to be bang on the hour, but if we can try and keep it within that would be great. So slave wound in your shortest version, what is it, and then what is the opposite to the slave wound?
Okay, so the slave money wound, what that looks like is essentially people that are holding that are usually very good workers. They're usually not adverse to putting in a hard day's work. They are able to show up. A lot of times they're the people on the team that, you know, everybody else loves because they're always picking up slack. They're always putting in their all. They tend to have an internalized kind of oppressor that, however, that's operating within them. And so there can be a lot of habits that lead to overwork, that lead to sacrificing your own needs, that lead to sacrificing your own desires, who you really are, what you really want, in order to obey basically authority that is outside oneself in relationship to either job or career, or if you are a business owner, you can have this like operating within you while you are in business. There's a lot of just sort of, whatever I can get consciousness that's running in terms of how you relate to money, usually a lot of scarcity and a lot of fear of survival that's associated with that. And when that wound is activated, you're essentially living inside the consciousness, and it could be coming from your ancestry. It could be coming from the fact that your ancestors were enslaved, and this was an actual event that happened to you and to your people, and it's being carried in the DNA. The trauma of it's being carried in the DNA. It could be something that happened to you in a past life, and you still have the coding for that because of that trauma. And it could also be something that you just absorb from the collective consciousness, because there are a lot of levels of how we're taught that we should be in our economic system, that, people want a good working class.
They've trained us to be that
right.
way.
They've trained us to be a good working class. You're a good working class, a good servant, right? Or a good, in many cases, slave. But the energy behind it is actually, no, you're actually in this energetic enslavement. So when you are addressing the slave wound, you're really starting to address your relationship to hierarchical power dynamics. So power over another. And a lot of people say, oh, we shouldn't have hierarchical power dynamics. But the fact of the matter is that the whole human experience is actually woven with hierarchical power dynamics. None of us come here and get a body. All of us, when we get this little human body, we are absolutely helpless. We are absolutely dependent on a seemingly all-powerful force, usually mommy or daddy, outside ourselves for our own survival. So power dynamics are inherent in the whole process of evolving as a human being. Now, we can have sacred power dynamics versus those that result in the corruption, which slavery would be basically the ultimate corruption of a sacred power dynamic. So the healing principle for the slave wound is actually servitude. And it's really understanding that in what we might call God, as you ascend in the power system of the divine, the higher up you go in power, the more you are serving the well-being of all of those who are under you. And that's basically, you know, the noble king or the noble queen or the noble emperor is somebody who in some ways almost doesn't even have their own personal freedom. They're in many ways, you might even, maybe not a slave, but they are in absolute service to a whole group of beings that are existing under their leadership or under their tutelage. So when you start to really heal the slave wound, number one, somebody that has the slave wound, you have to kind of step into the opposite polarity to heal it. So you have to step out of servant and you have to step into master. You have to step into sovereign. You have to step into the leader, the leadership archetype, which if you have the slave wound, you might have a lot of enemy images and a lot of trauma, maybe from your ancestors or maybe from your past life, which is saying, I don't want to be that, because that means I'm going to become an oppressor. I'm going to become an enslaver. So you have to reprogram this idea of what the leader or what the sovereign actually means and actually is, and really understand that your own empowerment, your own resource, your own ability to be fully taken care of and have all that you need to manifest what it is that you desire to manifest is an act of service to, you know, all of those under you. And if you don't like, again, this kind of goes back to the beginning of our conversation with me working at Amazon. You don't like how Jeff Bezos does it, get out of the role and step into that seat yourself and be the noble leader or be that noble CEO, or however you want to design it, so that you're in sacred service to the needs of those who are under you. And so the principle of mastery and servitude basically understands that in the money system, we're all servants, every single one of us. And that actually those that probably have the most freedom in a money system are those with the least amount of responsibility, who would actually be the ones at the bottom of the system. You know, and I always say this because I always look at the path of the renunciant, just give up everything and go wander in the mountains. And I'm like, most freedom, the most freedom there. So much freedom to not have anything, not have any belongings, and to sort of follow the winds and, you know, the yogic path like that. Whereas like the king or the queen, in some ways, is almost like their life is, there's a lot of what we might even call bondage in that life. It's a bondage that hopefully comes from a place of love and hopefully comes from a place of service to the kingdom or to the empire, towards the project, what the mission, whatever it is. Yeah.
The healthy expression. So just to recap, I've just realized we're not going to do all 5 in this. However, it's well worth you following Cara for actually going on the course, but also we're having her back. But I wanted to go back into what you just said, and it's really interesting because I've really kind of taken a deep dive into astrology lately with regards to my own personal chart. I've been having a look at that, and the astrologer that I've been working with, Jev, who's on previous shows, if anybody wants to go and check that out, please do. Jev expressed to me that there's a part of my, whether it's past lives or other energies that are with me that have had these lives that are working through me, however all of this stuff works. We'll go with past lives for now. A past life that I have had, or many of the past lives that I've had, has been this sacred wisdom wanderer floating around the planet and doing whatever I wanted, philosophy, you know, looking for the alchemy within life and finding it within myself. And my flip side now is coming here and bringing that freedom and that wisdom into the collective. Apparently my role in this is to be able to help other people have that freedom, but it's coming at a sacrifice of myself, where I have to keep climbing the ladder, which is something that I know that I'm doing. But in terms of taking that leadership role, but doing it from a healthy, conscious place and being seen and you know, and sharing that with people. Whereas past lives, I've been on my own. I've been wandering around the mountains, doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And when she said it, I was just like, oh God. And then when I listened, it was the same week she told me that. And then when I had my reading and I was listening to your course, and you were like, yeah, well, to have the, you know, to have the slave past in some way, because there's other areas that I've been in where I've been controlled in some way or suppressed in some way, is to now come out and to shine, be seen, and be, you know, accept that I have power and use it for the good of people, which, you know, I try to do every day. And it's a real responsibility that I've chosen to, in whatever capacity, I've chosen to bring into this life, because, you know, I'm a speaker. I do motivational speaking. I use my voice. I do guided meditations. People listen to me, and I have to take responsibility for that. And I used to just talk absolute shit. I used to just be like, you know, whatever, I'd pass different things on. I was gossip, drama. I loved it because it gave me the attention that I was, you know, I felt I was lacking. But then a healthy expression of that is actually sharing a healthier version of the wisdom that you've got, not the gossip, it's the wisdom. But it requires absolute, you know, discernment. And that means, you know, working on myself, meditating, researching, checking up on facts, making sure what I'm passing on is worth its weight and that it resonates, because I know how far my voice can go and how people do listen to me. And that's a power to, you know, that every word comes out of your mouth, that someone's going to be like, well, Nat says so, and I think, you know, whatever she's talking about is correct. That's a lot of responsibility, and it's been a massive weight. But it fits perfectly with what you were saying, is that, you know, it's not that I'm not free, because I'm free in many ways in my decisions, but I do feel like I'm here to serve, like huge service to people in a way of helping them. You know, I'm studying natural law, and not common law, if anybody asking, not common law, it's natural law, it's the ancient hermetic principles, and bringing that into our consciousness. That's a large amount of freedom most people aren't willing to even tap into, because they have to make radical decisions to align with that level of freedom. And that's where you have to own all your own bullshit and admit that you're wrong and go on that path. So everything that you're saying is just ringing true, and it did when I heard it the first time. And I just think you've got so much passion and wisdom for what you're doing, and your mind, you just go off on one. And we're in like Egypt, and then we're back over in India, and then we're talking about something else, and then we're talking about God economics, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love listening.
No, it's a little. Sometimes I'm like, it might be overwhelming for people, but yeah, I have a very kind of Jungian approach. I think like that would definitely be. I like to kind of map the consciousness of the patterns that are going on, and yeah, and I definitely like history, because I do a lot of Akashic work, so a lot of it is like really going back into the records, and you know, both actual records, like actual history, and then also, you know, the histories that weren't necessarily written down. That we hold,
the hidden histories.
The hidden histories. Yeah.
I love your work, and what I want to do is leave it under the hour, because more people are going to incline to click on it, and this is really important content for people to hear. I want you back, definitely, if you'll have me. And I just think, you know, what you're doing, we're going to put all of the information under this video about what you can do with Kara, how you can explore all of the different principles that she's teaching. As I said before, it's the sacred prostitute, which is a really interesting non-judgmental space to go into. The sacred wealth, the Magdalene wounds, there's so many different teachings, but you've got something which I would love to mention now, which is I saw pop up on my email, which was the 21-day is it kind of like the abundance challenge? Is that right? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, there's this week, actually, June 1st to June 22nd, 21st, we're going to be doing a 21-day Tantric Manifestation practice. So this is actually going to be directly working with the divine feminine energy, and particularly, you know, we're season right now. Well, do Vedic history. So we're in Taurus season right now. We've got the sun of sensuality and materiality and abundance that's really guiding us up into the summer solstice. So there's going to be a 21-day tantric manifestation. This is bringing sexuality, sensuality, and money magic together to manifest. And you can go to returnofthetemple.com/lush, LUSH, to get details on that. But I also just want to say, I think for people that, if you're really interested in the money wounds work and wanting to go deeper, there is like a short initiation. I think it's the course you took, Nat, called the Sacred Wealth Initiation, which really initiates you into all of the sacred wealth mysteries. And they could get that call series at returnofthetemple.com / I think it's sacred-wealth-initiation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Perfect. We'll have all of those links underneath anyway, so Brian will be typing them out. Thank you, Brian, in advance. But yeah, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. I'm absolutely in love with your work. I think it's amazing, and it's just people need to hear what you've got to say. It's a good perspective. It's well researched. It comes with a lot of information. I certainly resonated. It popped up on YouTube as it does when I was, you know, in my deep dark shadow looking at the sacred prostitute and all these different things, and up you popped, and I was like, oh my God, I feel normal. So I clicked and you were there, which was great. So thank you so much. And so your website's going to be underneath us. Social media, can people get you on social media as well?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at waking.beauty, and I'm on Facebook under Kara Gilligan, and I have a YouTube channel, which you could you would search Akara Sophia. I could give you the links.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. And my website, just go to my website actually, and you can get links everywhere. It's wakingbeauty.com. Yeah.
Wakingbeauty.com. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, for everyone else at home watching this, I hope this has been enlightening for you in some way. I'm sure it has, and it's made you think about a few things. All the information is below. Kara, will you come back?
I would love that. Yes.
Okay, cool. We will go down another rabbit hole because your mind is so expansive, and I want to go down there a million times. So yes, we will have Kara back. I'm unclear when that will be. I'm trying to do one show a week at the moment and not stress myself. But yes, she will be back, thank goodness. And don't forget that I also have I Am Sound Academy, which is the membership that I will be launching in July, and it is all teaching you all the sacred principles of sound, energy, and vibration, and why it's important to understand that in relationship to what's going on in the world right now. If you're into magic and science and conspiracies and quantum physics and histories and hidden stuff, you will love it. It's going to be £10 a month maximum, no upsells, everyone pays the same price. Conscious economics across the board, and I'm very excited to get that out. And if you haven't already, you can get us on the app. You can go to the Google App Store, or you can go to the Play Store. You can download I Am Sound. You can get the radio app, and we now have the TV channel on Roku and on where else? Amazon Fire Stick, and Apple TV will be in 30 days from now. I'm very excited. So yes, go and find us, check us out. Kara, stay there if you can. Everybody else, thank you very much for your time, and we will see you on the next one. Bye for now.